What's going on, guys? It's Cimo, and welcome to episode 3 of my Yu-Gi-Oh! Podcast, where I bring you guys some of the greatest minds in Yu-Gi-Oh! To discuss a wide myriad of subjects ranging from competitive Yu-Gi-Oh! To strategy, card theory, and everything else in between. Today, I am honored to have on my third guest, Mr. Pro Play Tour Invitational Champion, just came off of a top 4 in the most recent Pro Play Tour Weekend Championship, Mr. Pak Pamornsut. Pat, how are you doing today?
I'm doing really well, Cimo. Thanks for asking me to come out. I love to do this kind of stuff, man.
Yeah, absolutely. I thought you'd be a perfect person to discuss the topic of today's video, and that's going to be getting back into Yu-Gi-Oh! Or really just starting into Yu-Gi-Oh! In the first place. I think you have such an incredible story. When I met you last January, and really learning about that inspired me to make this video. So I guess where I want to start is actually first promote yourself, because you do have a YouTube and Twitch of your own, so I want people to know who you are and where they can find you either before or after this video.
So I have a YouTube channel. It's Pak Official TCG. I love trading card games. That's why I named it like that. But I make Yu-Gi-Oh! Related content regarding competitive Yu-Gi-Oh! Most specifically, and how to improve as a player. And yeah, that's pretty much it. I also stream live on Twitch at twitch.tv/Pak_official_TCG. So definitely check me out there as well. I love to interact with you guys. I know we can't be face to face, but in the meantime, we'll do with what we can. And
I'll definitely have all those links down in the description for you guys, so you know where to find Pak. So I want to start by talking about your history leading up to Yu-Gi-Oh! If I recall, I think you started playing, if you told me correctly, July of 2019. So that's talk about recent, right? So what was your history leading up to that? What inspired you to really get into the Yu-Gi-Oh! Trading card game in the first place?
So I play a lot of trading card games. I play Hearthstone. I really enjoy that. I looked into Dragon Ball, Super. I looked into Magic. Back then, I just graduated, and so I was just looking to fun card games to play. And then I watched the anime. So I was rewatching it just because after school ended, I graduated. I was like, oh man, let's go watch some anime. And then Yu-Gi-Oh! Came up, and I was like, man, it would actually be really cool to just play this. So I actually went on YouTube. And I looked at your content, actually, Cimo, and a bunch of other YouTubers, and I was like, oh man, I think I'm gonna do it. So I went out and bought 3 structure decks, Salamangreat structure decks. And you had a video out at the time, which was called I think one of the best budget Salamangreat lists. And I was like, yo, I gotta get this, man. It's $30. Say no more, low investment, and just try it out. That's pretty much it, and the rest was history.
Going from that, I want to elaborate a little bit more. So you started with the Salamangreat decks. So what was the process from that? Because then it was only 6 months later you won your first big tournament that you ever entered in January. So take me on the journey from $30 Salamangreat pack to first place champion pack playing Altergeist.
So I played Salamangreats for 2 months. I wanted to pick up Salamangreat because it was a budget deck, right? And then for someone who's starting the game, investment into the game is a very important decision, right? Not everyone can just drop $500 and play the best deck at the time. So I figured, why not start with Salamangreats? And so what I did was I played it for 2 months, and I went and watched a lot of YouTube videos, man. I think YouTube is a great resource for people to improve at the game, and people were showing a lot of combo videos. So I watched how to chain block with Gazelle. Bro, I was ashing stuff that couldn't be ashed. That's how bad I was. Right? It was. I tried to ash a Hawk effect, Reborn. It was really rough. But the local scene was really nice. They taught me how to play Yu-Gi-Oh! They taught me the fundamentals of just straight up Yu-Gi-Oh! Mechanics. And then eventually I moved on to another deck. I played Pendulums. Pendulum was really cool because Salamangreat was more of a control deck. I got better as a player, went to hand trap, how to control the game. And I decided to play Pendulums because I figured, why not play this was still, I wanted to keep this budget, right? So at this time, I didn't want to invest a lot into the game yet. So I picked up Pendulum because it's really cheap. Under $100, you can get the whole deck. And it was a combo deck, right? And so I decided to make that switch from playing control to combo, just so I can improve on the combo front of from a fundamental perspective, combo front of Yu-Gi-Oh! I played that all the way up until Electromag got banned the week before I think the PPG Invitational Championship in January. And I actually went on that trip on a whim. One of my friends reached out to me and was like, hey, I'm gonna go to Orlando. You should come. And I figured, why not? Let's give it a shot. I've been playing Altergeist at that time for a month. It was a deck that I was really having fun with. and I had to like switch just because Electromite got banned. But and then I just won the event. I guess it was a right meta call. I was drawing really well, so overall it was really it was a good time for sure.
I want to take a step back now, going back to when you first started playing. You said you have a history with other card games, at least to a minor degree.
Yeah.
How did you feel specifically about Yu-Gi-Oh's learning curve, either as its own or in relativity to other card games?
Oh man, Yu-Gi-Oh is the most complicated card game I've ever played. this game is so man, there's so many ruling nuances like that it's just like a nightmare. Like it's just really like tough to like learn, to be honest. But I think playing a lot, or like just at least like I would go on the weekends. Like I didn't play on the weekdays, but I would go on the weekends and play on the weekends every now and then. You learn those interactions over time. It's not something you can just like pick up. So I basically started playing, and you know, the friends like taught me, like YouTube taught me, and like slowly over time, like it was taught me. Like I said, YouTube is a really good resource. Like I can list a bunch, like MST TV, for example, like puts out like Yu-Gi-Oh like stuff you should watch out for, because people like for the most part, people don't cheat on purpose. They cheat by accident. Like they do plays that shouldn't be done, right? I do that too, and so like we learn along the way.
Was there one mechanic in particular, or multiple, that was like really hard to grasp, like something that stands out?
Oh yeah, link summoning. Okay, this sounds really dumb because link summoning is like so easy. But when I said I watched Yu-Gi-Oh, I only watched like the OG one way back in the day. I watched like a little bit of Fusion with like 5Ds like Jaden, but I didn't watch Reigns or like any of that. So I had no idea what the blue monsters were. So the hardest part about me getting into Yu-Gi-Oh was I actually had to Google what is link summoning, and I, believe it or not, I actually didn't understand it the first time around. So I had to like watch a YouTube video on how to actually perform it. Like it was actually very confusing for me. I like didn't, but obviously it's like such a simple mechanic. You just send it to the graveyard. But I couldn't wrap my head around that. I'm like, bro, this is actually broken. Like you can actually just send a monster or summon a new one. So yeah, I didn't get that at first. Yeah, don't get me started on pendulums though. The pendulum was probably the hardest thing to ever learn. I think I was so bad at pendulums, man. I just pen summon my whole hand and just called it a day, and my opponent would be like, what happened? I'm like, you can't do that. I'm like, oh, bro, because I would summon from my extract everything, because that's what I saw on YouTube. But like the new pendulum mechanics, you have to summon under the link zones, right? So I watched the wrong YouTube video, and so I like misplayed really badly at locals. But the people are really nice. Like I said, the Yu-Gi-Oh community is very friendly, very wholesome, and they teach you how to like play properly. Yeah,
so I want to elaborate on that too. You've already mentioned a couple people, but even if you want to mention specific content creators or specific sources, what do you feel are the best resources for anyone who's either looking to get into the game from the start or is looking to return to the game after a long hiatus?
Right, yeah. I mean, the first thing I think you should do is watch like a YouTube video on like the top 5 meta decks, or like and the top 5 rogue decks of the format. So when I entered, that's what I did. That's how I found out about Salamangreats. And then whatever your budget is, like pick up that deck IRL and just practice it. Obviously, like watch as many videos as you can to like understand the combo, so you don't just pick up a deck and find out you hate the playstyle. After that, you find the playstyle that matches you. So if you find out that you like more of like a control-y, longer grind game, then like find a control deck. And then if you find out that you like to just go off and combo, like pick up a combo deck. And then from there, pretty much just keep playing, and then eventually like you'll learn the in and out of that deck. And then once you get to that comfort level, you can then start going to like regionals and other premier events, just so that you can like get and face better people, just so you can improve, if that's your goal. If you want to play like more casually, then it's a whole different mindset, right? It's kind of like you just pick any deck you want and then just go to locals and just play to have fun, because a lot of like Yu-Gi-Oh for me it's about having fun as well, right? Like you can't just like playing the best deck for me, like I could have taken Spiral to like the PPG event, but to be quite frank, like it wasn't like fun for me. Like I found out I was having more fun with Altercase, although it isn't, don't get me wrong, Silk Bounce is really annoying. Like Protocol is really annoying. Like I understand that. Like No Suit is really annoying, but it was fun for me. So yeah, that's pretty much it. Like I think the most important thing is to have fun while you're doing this. Like it shouldn't be a chore, man. If you enjoy what you're doing, like it sounds super like cliche, but that's true, man. Like I truly fell in love with this game, and that's why like I just kept playing. Like it's just, and the community is really like friendly too.
Yeah, you always have this really big smile on your face when you're playing. I've noticed, because I've had the chance to watch you both on stream and like when I've casted you when you were at the Invitational, for instance. So it's funny, you have like this very intense look, but then you also are like smiling half the time too. So that's really nice to see that, like even though you're in the thick of it, you're zoned in, just wanting to make sure that you're doing everything perfectly, that you're still having fun at the same time. Another question I wanted to ask you is, and I think this is also very interesting when it comes to your story specifically, is that you actually mentioned this right before we started this discussion, as a matter of fact, you've probably played more online Yu-Gi-Oh than in-person Yu-Gi-Oh, and I think that's probably not what most people have experienced, especially for people who've played the game since the onset, you know. So go ahead and tell me how your experience has been really learning this game online, because again, you've already mentioned the learning curve of this game is incredibly steep. So how does that compare when you're playing online versus in person?
I think playing online, actually makes me improve so much as a player. I obviously just saw some success this past weekend, like getting top 4, but I think that playing online is so huge because you can watch your replays and learn from them, which is something traditionally you couldn't do when you're playing IRL. The other really important thing is there's no budget limitations, and that's something really important to consider, that not everyone can afford Lightning Storm, right? Like not everyone can just play Extravagant. So the fact that there's no budget limitation, you can play triple Lightning Storm, triple Nabu. Basically any card you want with no budget limitation means that people are truly playing decks that they believe are the best decks, or the decks that they're having the most fun with, right? So when you go to a competitive online event like the PBG, for example, or the LCS, these people are playing with no budget limitations, which is I think a great, a more accurate representation of what Yu-Gi-Oh would be if there were no budget. And so that's definitely it. And it is weird though, learning a lot, learning and playing online more than playing IRL, but I think there's definitely a lot of value. And the Duel Book, I use Dueling Book, but it has a platform where you can search out any card. And so I found out really cool text just by going on Duel Book and just looking up card texts. So you find out a lot of things that you normally wouldn't if you just straight up tested IRL. So I think there's some value just playing online as well.
Yeah, I think you touched on something very important when it comes to the no budget aspect of online play, is that let's say you are someone who maybe can't afford Yu-Gi-Oh cards. There are simulators and programs out there that you can play and have access to literally every card. And currently at the time of recording this video, we're under quarantine with coronavirus in the midst of all this pandemic. But one of the nice things about this is that we're seeing the online community prosper in such a way that, we have this metagame currently that is not restricted by budget. And that's typically something that we don't often see. Typically, we have the physical in-person events, which that is going to, preclude some people, because whether it's the cost of the cards, cost of travel, so on, and you have the online metagame kind of in their own spheres. But right now, the former does not exist, right? It's solely online. And yeah, you might be able to play with your friends just one-on-one casually, but in terms of competitive online play, it's literally online or bust right now, and I find that really interesting. One thing I did notice that you said very early on was about how you were talking about the ability with online that you're able to watch your replays. And one of the things I've noticed about you that I really admire about you is that you are a very self-reflexive player. You are very focused on what you have control over versus aspects that are out of your control. And I think that is an area in which a lot of players in the community can improve on. Can you elaborate on that for me a little bit more? How do you go through that process to really analyze every aspect of your game to kind of figure out what is your fault versus what isn't your fault?
So I think something I do that I think helped me improve as much as a player is tells. I when I play someone, judging from their voice or the way they type or stuff, I can usually predict what cards they have in their hand, and sometimes it backfires, right? But for the most part, if you know the metagame, you know what the 40 card deck of what's in Adamantiators, you know what the Eldic decks are running, right? So you know what hand traps are running, so you know how to play around cards. So when you watch replays, right, you have that knowledge of both players' hand, but you normally don't have that when you're in the game. So when you watch the replays, you can reevaluate from what was I thinking at that time, and was that the correct thinking? So like, for example, like was playing around Nibiru correct here, or not? And I think replays are really, really nice. And I think the most important ones are the ones you lost, because you can watch, you know, like the games in which sometimes you break, but sometimes there's like ways you can actually like play while like opening up like terrible, right? Like, and I think there was a situation where I won even though I opened up double O-line, and it's just that you have to like just evaluate the game state and figure out like how you can progress. And I think watching your replays is so huge, like, and like learning from them, like truly like learning from them. But obviously there are times where like you would break and it's like straight up unplayable, but even looking at that, like those unplayable hands and trying to figure out like, you know, is it truly unplayable, right? Because a lot of people say they break, but like, did you actually break? Could you have like done something which could like increase your chances of winning in this situation? But I think like being able to tell, you know, like understanding like the meta game, understanding what the cards that go into like the decks, the meta decks right now is really helpful. Like, you know how to play around so many cards.
Yeah, and I think that's really important too, because when you're evaluating your own matches, whether it's you're watching a replay or you're running through that match in your head, which I think watching the replay is a little bit better just because then you're not, you know, forgetting any of the information that was available at the time. I think it's important to analyze, you know, every aspect of what could have been different, because Yu-Gi-Oh is rather unique in the sense that a single card being played at the inopportune moment can be the difference between whether you won or lost. And yes, that applies to other card games, but I think because the value of each individual card in Yu-Gi-Oh is so high, I think it matters way more in this game specifically. And that's where people may not really focus on those nuances. Just the difference between, you know, ashing one target versus another target literally can make all the difference. And you could realize, oh, well, you know, that was the reason why I lost, not because your opponent had the extender, let's say, to play through it. So going off of that a little bit, how do you, I guess, find, what are the best suggestions for people to maybe kind of focus more on themselves rather than the opponent? Because you'll hear a lot of people in their bad beat stories, they'll say stuff like, oh, my opponent top decked like the perfect card, or oh, my opponent opened the nuts. How do you kind of break those mentalities that some people might succumb to that may lean more towards the negative self-talk that might, or they might just want to just dismiss the whole thing as something that was out of their control?
Oh, man. I have a perfect example. Like when I played Gabriel Zusi this past weekend at the PBG, like after the game, right, like I definitely did break, but I just straight up told him he's just like a really, really good player. And I didn't attribute my loss to like breaking as much as the fact that he just played around everything perfectly. Like he's playing Salamangreat for Christ's sakes, and he played around Nibiru. He played around Nibiru and OTK'd me. I was like, what? Like, so I think that like you have to like kind of like, you know, appreciate good players when you get the chance to play them, and then learn from how they like play the game. Like watching like Gabriel like, you know, maneuver and navigate Salamangreats gave me a whole new, I guess, maybe what's the right word, respect for the deck, right? And him as a player. Like I now know that these are different routes that Salamangreats can take, and I have to be more prepared for it the next time around. And I think that's like the mentality that you should have, right? Like that when you play against, like, for example, a really good like Adamancer player, the way they sequence their plays is really important. And like learning how they sequence those plays and like play around hand traps, like it teaches you like when to hand trap them properly. And I also think another important thing you should do is play the meta decks and truly understand them. Because if you're playing like a deck like Water, or you're playing a deck that aren't those decks, being able to, like, even though I'm a control player at heart, I know how to play combo, and I think that's really important. Because if you can play those decks, then you can beat them.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you about playing those specific decks, because I think you have a completely different mindset when you're playing the deck versus observing someone playing the deck, because I feel like it's easy to be overly critical of certain plays that someone might be making, but you have to realize that when they're playing, they might be thinking completely differently from how you are. You know, they might have different information. They might be looking at different tells. You mentioned that. That's kind of like, you know, leaning more into like the poker aspect of the game, especially in the physical card game, when you're able to actually sit across from your opponent. There's definitely so many different angles you can take it from and really up your game in a way. And I think because you are very like introspective, you are very self-reflexive in that way. You've been able to see so much success in such a short period of time relative, you know, with all the odds stacked against you, with how hard the game is to play, going up against some of the best players in the game. You know, I could go on, but you know, here you are now. You know, a lot of people do look up to you and look to you for advice in a lot of different ways, and even with that said, you are still improving at the same time. But for everyone out there who is looking for maybe some advice for whether they are starting to get into the game or maybe they're trying to return into the game, in either instance, I think you'd be a perfect person to ask, like, what is like the best advice you think you would give to someone?
Don't give up, because I think there were times where like when I first started playing the game, I thought Danger Thunder Dragon was absolutely insane. So man, I got like hand looped in like 5 negates, and so that was very frustrating at the start, right? Because when you're first starting to play the game, there's a lot of really OP decks, and they do a lot of degenerate things, right? At least the meta decks, right? And I just brought it like a Salamangreat deck, man. I had 1 Ash, like a couple DD Crows, like it was, like, you know what I mean? This guy just hand looped me for 5 negates. Like, it's very frustrating at times, and you feel like you can't play. But I think that's why, like, I still was able to beat those players eventually, just because I took the time to learn their deck, when to hand trap them properly. And so I would say, like, you know, like, don't like give up or get frustrated the first time you lose, because I've lost so many times leading up to that PPG, and they all helped me like improve as a player, man. So I think those losses are like the most important ones. And if you do, I think good sportsmanship is also one thing, because with good sportsmanship allows you to interact with your opponent after the game, and then they can also like maybe teach you, you know, what are some things maybe you could have done differently from the opponent's perspective that would have, like, you know, destroyed their plays. And so that's pretty much it for me. You know, like, don't give up, man. Like, good luck, and hopefully I get to see you guys at like other events and stuff, and we might be in front of each other, so that'll be cool.
Pak, thank you so much for taking the time to be on this podcast. I think people are really gonna love to hear what you had to say, to hear your success story. Guys, thank you so much for watching the video. Be sure to let me know down in the comments what you guys think of this new Yu-Gi-Oh podcast. Seems like you guys are enjoying it, but if you have any other topic suggestions, feel free to let me know. Thank you so much for watching the video, and we will see you next time.